The background to this is extremely rapid global change, which, I mean, it may be a cliche that globalization is accelerating, etc., and that change, we're always in a transitional period. The fact is that the power structures of the 20th century, which became quite familiar to those of us of a generation after the Second World War, have changed into something else. And the institutions that went with those power structures of the second half of the 20th century are fading. There are very important institutions that survive and will continue, the United Nations in particular, NATO, the European Union, the regional organizations, certain other alliances. But the fact is, and we can't get away from this, that the world is changing more quickly than institutions can reform, because institutions are stuck in the charters of their original formation, which are now quite old. If you think about NATO, if you think about the UN, if you think even about the European Union, they are not adapting and cannot reform as quickly as the world changes. And therefore the procedures, the processes for dealing with problems have to be increasingly ad hoc and laid over in a tectonic plate sort of way, the old institutional plates. The old institutions remain useful in a great number of ways. And the UN in particular remains a highly effective and useful organization in certain aspects. But the UN cannot deal with problems which its member states, and particularly its most powerful member states, don't agree on, because the UN is a forum of member states. It isn't a separate agency. So the UN on its own can't handle the nuclear weapon question. The UN on its own can't handle the most difficult regional political issues. The UN on its own can't handle the breakdown and poor governance of certain states that become a liability to their own populations and to the world at large. And so a different format is needed to create progress on something like a drive for complete reduction in nuclear weapons. It's got to be subscribed to by a whole number of states and their peoples who increasingly have an element of consent to what their governments are doing, and therefore creates a much more complex set of pieces that you have to fit into a jigsaw than happened 50 years ago. So in creating nuclear weapon capability through our scientists and our military men and through our politicians of 60 or 70 years ago, we have created something which we should have controlled more then, because it's more difficult now, and therefore the task ahead of us against the background of global change is exceptionally complicated.